Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this next webinar. This is a very interesting webinar. So we're going to be exploring specifically the legal sector, but obviously some of this value prop actually extends beyond the legal sector. But we're going to be looking at the ins and outs of Azure Virtual Desktop. Today you've got me, Leon Godwin. I am the Principal Cloud Evangelist. My job is to share my knowledge and experience with customers, prospects and colleagues alike. We've also got Dan. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Hi, my name's Dan Robbins. I've been a cloud director now for about 8 years, predominantly focused within the legal sector.
And Gavin.
Perfect. Thanks, Leon. Thanks, Dan. My name is Gavin Connolly and I am Field CTO at Nerdio. Been at Nerdio for about 9 months now. And yeah, really looking forward to sharing some of the experience of my 9 months at Nerdio and my decade in the broader virtualization and EUC area and arena.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, gents. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of the elements within the sort of broader landscape in terms of some of the compelling events and some changes that have gone on with VMware are a compelling event. And I know VMware Horizon is something that is a lot of the legal industry had previously adopted. We're going to look at use cases, we're going to see some examples of ABD and explore those deployment challenges, and also we're going to provide a Q&A. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Kim, who is moderating, will at the end let us know if you have any questions, so please feel free to engage. That's what we're here for. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. So one of the things we've seen in the marketplace is actually there's quite a shift as younger staff start joining the workforce. Their expectations is different from older folk like me, and so they want something that's familiar. They want to be able to work from multiple locations. They want that to always be available, whilst from a business perspective there is an extra focus on cost. Scalable, resilient desktop as a service should be native to any platform and any provider, but being able to integrate with compliance rules that have been set up. If you think about it, you've probably already, the vast majority of you are going to be on something like Microsoft 365. That's vastly true of this industry, and so you've already got a compliance landscape, a security boundary, so having something that integrates with that makes your life easier rather than having a separate one. So when it comes to the compelling events that would drive people to pivot from whatever their current operating model is to a target operating model that includes Azure Virtual Desktop, often it can be around security breaches where there are traditionals. We've all heard the stories of the laptops being left on trains and what have you. There can also be lots of organisations. I know lots of law firms, for example, have invested in large amounts in infrastructure. Some of that might be in the data centre, might be in comms rooms within your own building, and obviously we can have end of life. Disaster recovery can be an issue especially because of the cost of that. It's kind of like, I think disaster recovery, especially with a hardware-based kind of solution, it's kind of like you're duplicating your infrastructure, which is like an insurance policy that costs as much as the original infrastructure. Imagine if your car insurance was the same price as your car. You wouldn't necessarily think that's great value for money, especially 99% of the time. Hopefully you don't need it. So growth is another thing. Changing in work patterns. Obviously, COVID was a compelling inflection point that caused certain changes in behaviours, and some of those have carried on today. So multiple different compelling events, and many of these are what are driving people to adopt Azure Virtual Desktop. Another thing that just anecdotally, VMware was acquired by Broadcom, a chip manufacturer, in the end of last year, and very quickly they announced a sort of strategic shift into sort of rather than buying components, it would be bundling. Imagine if you only needed Excel but you were mandated to buy Word and you couldn't just buy Office, and you couldn't just buy the one thing. You end up paying a lot more for when you only need a subset of things, and that created some anxiety. Then the announcement of VMware Horizon 7 going end of life And then adding on to that, bearing in mind I've started in November, only in December, the CEO of Broadcom announced that they're going to spin off the end user compute division, including those VMware Horizon. All of that, whether you were a VMware Horizon customer or just a VMware customer in general, created some kind of uncertainty, and that started to drive people to look for alternative solutions. And when they looked at alternative solutions, when it came to the VMware, the virtual desktop space, AVD was coming out as quite compelling. So just in summary, Horizon 7 goes end of life in less than a year, and you want to start your mitigation plans much sooner than that. And obviously not doing anything is obviously going to be a challenge. So in terms of non-compliance and issues with lack of updates, and obviously the reputational implications are huge, especially for law firms. They very much you guys very much trade on your reputation, and so a large data loss or security incident would not be helpful. And also, we live in a landscape where we are, budgets are more constrained than ever. So having pivoting to something that might drive something that's more cost effective would be useful. If we look at Gartner's most recent Magic Quadrant when it comes to that desktop as a service space, we can see that we have VMware and Citrix in the top right hand box, but much further to the right hand side we see Microsoft, their ability to actually deliver against a cloud vision and have that completeness of service is seen as leader. So it's very, very useful in addressing that. Also, there's kind of a broader trend towards desktop as a service, and in myself, I do a lot of work in the AI space. I use AVD for I have a development machine that I use to go and develop stuff, and then I have a production machine to go and do demonstrations. I find it a lot easier than, for example, using my laptop. So what is AVD? AVD is great. Once upon a time, you used to have remote desktop services. Remote desktop services included a whole bunch of different servers. But now what you're having is a whole bundle of capabilities delivered from one platform, and that capability, that platform from the broker services and what have you, are all delivered effectively free of charge. You pay for the compute for your desktop, but all the other infrastructure that just comes as part of the platform. And its ability to be able to integrate applications that run in the cloud and actually pin them to your local taskbar on your machine, you can do all that. So these are, you can see on the left here, we have applications running on your local machine in terms of the Edge browser. On the right hand side, you've got Word, and it's running in the cloud, and they're running side by side. So it's a very seamless experience. Once upon a time, RDS didn't have that level of maturity, but now it does. So it's a very compelling proposition. So those organizations that are thinking about the move to AVD, whether it is you are motivated around security, is security and the protection of your data particularly important? Are you looking to optimize your costs? And I'll touch on that in a moment in terms of the cost optimization opportunity. And are you putting yourself in a competitive disadvantage using a more expensive legacy technology? Why would you choose AVD versus other solutions to be able to address those motivators? Because it's one of the most complete solutions you can get on the market, as the Gartner Quadrant showed, and they are the leaders in that space. Also, as I'll touch on in a moment, the cost efficiencies that you can gain from AVD over competitors is quite compelling. And then finally, if you want to transition to AVD, there is a suite of capabilities and services and resources available to help you with that transition. If we just touch on some of the kind of drivers that sit within the landscape of the legal sector, there's very much a focus. The cyber threat is ever increasing. I'm a certified ethical hacker, and I'm aware of just the increase that I'm seeing, activities on the dark web and the various monitorings that take place. The cyber threat is ever increasing and becoming more pronounced, and I'm sure AI is probably going to accelerate and exacerbate that threat. Even though I'm a massive advocate of it, it does come at a price. So those that want to provide remote access for those law firms that are tied to the office and they want that remote access, those that are looking to be compliant, those that may be going through acquisition cycles or want dynamically scalable infrastructure. So rather than invest in a big bunch of physical tin to run your remote desktop on-prem, for example, where you're effectively overnight, that capacity is barely being used, actually having something that can dynamically scale so you only pay for what you need. If you think about it, you probably work something in the regions of about 264 hours a month, but there's actually 730 hours in a month. And so even at 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, you are there's 2/3 of the month that compute isn't really needed. Being able to seamlessly integrate, the vast majority of the legal sector is embedded with Microsoft 365. Having that seamless integration delivers a lot of value, and being able to work with legacy applications, improve productivity, adopt things like Microsoft 365 Copilot can all be very advantageous. So you come with this kind of suite of benefits, but I want to touch on the sort of cost efficiency side of things. Now, I use AVD in my personal life. I have some ad hoc requirements and I use AVD and I pay for it out of my own money, because actually I end up, for that particular use case, I may only need AVD for an hour a month. So why would I pay for a whole load of infrastructure when my requirement is that cheap? So consequently, my AVD bill, I can probably run for a few months for the price of a cup of coffee for my specific personal use case. But when it comes to, if we take as read that Microsoft 365 is, we're talking very high 90s adoption within the legal sector, that you have those licenses in place, then there is a cost associated with that. And if you run solutions such as those from VMware or those from Citrix, you have to pay for a compute component to run all those virtual desktops and apps on them. And then you've got to pay that vendor a licensing fee. And that adds up. But when you go AVD, you take away that licensing fee, because effectively, if you're a Microsoft 365 customer, you've already got that, what's called a VDA license, the Virtual Desktop Access license is bundled within the majority of M365 SKUs. And it's not available in the basic plans, but most legal sectors don't adopt basic. So you've actually removed one of the customers. This is a significant cost that you are paying to that vendor. I would encourage you to say, those that are watching now, look at your bill that you pay each month or year to a vendor such as Citrix, Nutanix, VMware for this desktop component, and just think that's immediate savings you can make, because you are taking value from your existing investment. You've got your 365, it's got a bunch of value that's untapped. Tap into that value. Ultimately, that enables you to do more, because you have more capabilities and more breadth of vision and capability from that virtual desktop service residing in Azure. That includes that additional value is the fact that it sits inside your established security boundary. It can make use of your existing two-factor authentication that you might have place, or your various compliance policies that you might have place. It would integrate directly and seamlessly with that, and you're not paying an additional licensing cost. So you are able to do more with less, which is one of the reasons I personally go and choose to use it versus any of the other products that are on the market. Having that flexibility from a pricing model as well, because this is effectively, as well as you've got the platform in terms of AVD, in terms of its platform as a service capabilities, the VMs itself are just compute resources in VMware. You can run graphics cards and what have you, and you can pay and use a pay-as-you-go model, which works for me. In your organization, you might want to go for a reserved instance and get all the capital savings, all the OPEX savings that you would have from adopting for a longer term commitment. So having that flexibility is a lot more valuable. And this is an example I talked about to my VMware. I'm spinning up a VM now. So this is my VM, I'm starting it up, but notice it says switched off and it's saying I'm starting your VM. I'm actually running in the background. I do that to save money. I'm launched into my desktop. I'm accessing this through a web browser. So I'm able to have full functionality from a web browser, which means practically any apps. But then what happens is I've become idle on that session, so it's disconnected me from that session, and a bunch of other policies kick in to life cycle that session, so I don't end up forgetting to, oh, I didn't power that down. I end up being cost optimal. So my sessions each month I can measure in pence, not pounds, for my particular consumption of the compute component. Now I appreciate my example is it's not going to be the same as yours from a business point of view, but the point is that agility to accommodate lots of different scenarios, the occasional worker, the regular worker, those with larger horsepower requirements, to be able to power things down and schedule them and boot them up automatically. I didn't have to do a thing, it just created access and capacity. You may be the first person to start in the day, or you can start these things on a schedule. Having that granular adaptability that enables you to pull on those cost-saving levers, incredibly valuable. So I'm going to hand over to Dan now to go and explore a little bit more around some customer stories. Dan, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Leon. Yeah, so as I said, I've been at Cloud now for about 8 years, and of course working with a number of legal firms. And so I wanted to kind of pick out two that really probably had kind of the most typical kind of approaches when it comes to and the reasons for moving over to AVD. First one is Floodgates. So actually, this was an exciting project because that was actually highlighted by Microsoft as showing best practice within the initial workshops and the assessment. Something that we'll kind of touch on a little bit later as to how we kind of approach this and what we do. But ultimately, Microsoft liked it so much that Microsoft Corporate asked us to be filmed to show how we approach this for an internal video that was sent to over, I think it was to about 30,000 or more of their internal employees, showcasing how working together, Microsoft and Cloud Direct can achieve kind of best practice. But the project itself, I mean, Floodgate it was a typical approach, migrating away from on-premise estate to Azure due to the usual end-of-life TIN support and a few other issues. But what we initially encountered was that it's probably a big one for everyone in the legal sector is Adherent. Adherent was too costly to move into Azure, and of course at the time, I'm not going to say anything further, but the lack of a decent kind of SaaS version from the vendor themselves. So of course we needed to overcome that. So we wanted to make sure that the users could still and fee owners could still access Adherent and other technologies which remained on premise, and of course AVD kind of allowed them to do so. So as I said, we'll touch on our approach a little bit later on, but we made sure that we kind of followed our CAF approach to really make sure exactly we captured everything they needed, and then moved into a kind of a POC stage to prove that the solution worked. With Ashurst, is the other side of the coin in terms of why they were moving, and this is down to kind of a upcoming costly Citrix renewal. Exactly the same kind of approaches you'd have with when it comes to VMware. What they were looking to try and do is consolidate technologies and costs. As the firm was growing, they wanted to make sure that things were costs were, and with the economic climate that is at the moment, costs are kind of brought into check as much as possible. And obviously consolidating those technologies and moving it all into kind of a single basket around Microsoft was the best way to deliver this. And that's it. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Much appreciated. So we're going to come back to Dan shortly, but what I want to do is just sort of articulate some of the sort of deployment challenges before I hand over. With any virtual desktop, if you are an IT person, I used to run an end user compute team way back in the day. I used to have like a team of 30 packages, creating applications, rolling them out to various councils throughout the UK. It had a substantial amount of effort. A lot of that effort has gone away, but there are still considerations, not least of which, how do you deploy it in the most cost optimal way? So it starts with an assessment and then you get to a deployment, but there's a bit in between that you need to focus on. And these are considerations such as, you know, your connectivity. And way back in the day, I could deliver something like a Citrix solution as an alternative to buying expensive WAN links, because WAN links were so expensive, it actually worked out to be more cost optimal. That doesn't exist anymore. Connectivity is ubiquitous. But there are other considerations of how you're going to manage this. Is it a different set of skills? Do you have, are you making use of your 365 and Azure tools today? And is that going to be a seamless journey? Are you going to need any additional tooling? You know, how are you going to manage backup recovery, right sizing, and ensuring an optimal end user experience? And so I'm going to hand over to Gavin now, who's going to help address those considerations around deployment. Over to you, Gavin.
Thanks, Leon. Yeah, so I think the large part of the challenge with Azure Virtual Desktop, you know, Microsoft has built a fantastic underlying platform from an Azure perspective. However, as Leon said, there's lots of considerations around how do you operationalize that? How do you ensure that you have visibility on your costs to control them? And how do you then optimize those costs? And that's where Nerdio comes in. And Nerdio and Microsoft have a really strong strategic partnership together. And that's a partnership focused on customers and accelerating that adoption and transformation to the cloud. And a big part of that, you know, we are working hand in glove together, whether that be here locally from a UK and Ireland perspective and broadly across EMEA, or at a global level from our kind of product and engineering perspective. We are working hand in glove together to make sure that customers have that value and can extract as much value from their Microsoft Azure commitments and their licensing, as Leon mentioned. So that's where we come in as Nerdio and Microsoft together to optimize and enhance and broaden that solution to ensure that, you know, customers that do have those traditional vendors of VMware and Citrix have that kind of bridge and path across into AVD with some broader technologies and feature sets that they're kind of used to and expecting from their virtual desktop experience. And if we go to the next slide, you know, Nerdio helps in three different ways. We can help to accelerate deployment, we can help to minimize and optimize cost, and we help with automation and to simplify the management of the platform to reduce that complexity. We are primarily focused on Azure Virtual Desktop, but we also help to manage Windows 365, AVD on Azure Stack HCI, and Microsoft Intune as well. And, you know, it's very important, you know, organizations, particularly law and legal firms, are taking and moving towards this solution of a mixture of Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365 and Microsoft Intune for their future-proofed technical solution and technical strategy. So Nerdio is that kind of wraparound, and I was talking to a very large FSI customer last week, and you know, he paid a very good compliment to Nerdio. He said, you start to talk about AVD and somebody immediately says Nerdio. We have become that, you know, that necessary, you know, bridge step to wrap around that Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365, Microsoft Intune solution to make it best in class and enterprise ready. And if we go to the next slide, you know, from a technology perspective, if we hone in on AVD for a moment, Nerdio doesn't have its own agent, it doesn't have its own client on the endpoint, it doesn't have its own gateway or brokering, it doesn't even have its own protocol. All of that, customers still leverage the native Azure Virtual Desktop control plane. What Nerdio is it's a platform as a service solution. We think of it as the bubble wrap that you wrap around those solutions to manage that technology. And what that it does then is it broadens the capabilities and broadens the solution set. It's that alternative admin portal from the Azure portal. And what that tool does is it helps in three different areas. It helps to reduce and optimize that Azure run cost, which in the current climate, we definitely need to be cost conscious and thinking about the TCO of the solution. It helps to improve resiliency and mitigate risk in terms of capacity limitations, disaster recovery, and auto healing. It helps to simplify and automate the life cycle of your images, your applications, and your hosts, your virtual machines. If we go to the next slide, we also then have the capability then to simplify and automate. Let's double click on that one. So if we look here, we can help to manage the image lifecycle of your golden images, your master images. That includes updating the OS on Patch Tuesday. It includes app installs, it includes registry changes, it includes running scripts. We have help desk tooling to help you shadow the session, give you session controls like logging users off, giving you the ability to reset the profile, things that aren't natively available or aren't easy to do in the Azure portal. We can give you a full library of scripted actions and Azure runbooks. That's your PowerShell scripts that you can use to help you automate the entire experience in the environment. We can help you manage your profiles, so managing and configuring your FS Logics profiles, managing and optimizing your storage, whether that be Azure files, NetApp files, or other. We can also help you to integrate with other platforms, whether that be things like GitHub or Azure DevOps to bring in your existing PowerShell scripts, whether it be Azure Insights, Zapago, or ControlUp for your monitoring, whether that be Power BI. We have some really interesting and granular user cost reporting, which is really important to visualize and see what those costs is, to track those costs, so we can push that all out into Power BI dashboards. We also have a full API, so you can hook into things like ITSMs, like ServiceNow, and other tools that you need to. If we go to the next slide, then the big thing that you get from Nerdio's kind of automation is time saving. So if we think creating a Windows 11 image inside of AVD and Nerdio, that takes just 45 minutes. The last time we had an event with Nerdio, we had our innovation day. We have another one coming up in London next week. But I polled the room and they said on average it took anywhere between 2.5 and 4 hours to deploy a Windows image in AVD natively. Nerdio reduces that down to 45 minutes. And really, that's maybe 10 minutes of admin hands-on tools. The rest is waiting for the process to kick in and to complete. Take app deployment and testing. We can deploy apps and test them within 15 minutes per app. AVD natively, it's about 30 minutes. Host pool configuration, we can do that in about 5 minutes. That's 15 minutes per pool in AVD native. Plus we get clever with things like repeatable templates for your RDP policies, whereas you have to do that on a per host pool basis in AVD natively. Very important, Patch Tuesday, OS updates. Nerdio can help you automate those and re-image and rebuild those existing hosts with the latest version of Windows every month on a repeatable basis, where that is a manual per host rebuild in AVD natively. We can also help with deleting single session machines. So we can have automated policies to delete machines after non-use for a particular period that's defined by the admin team, whereas that's a manual process that can lead to cost creep in AVD natively. This is just the kind of tip of the spear when it comes to time savings and automation and some of these capabilities from a Nerdio perspective. If we go to the next slide, please, Leo. Next, just as important as simplifying and automating the environment is to optimize those cost savings in that kind of Azure and in cloud in general. We are paying on a consumption basis, so we need to make sure that we have the tools in place to manage that and control that. And that's why Nerdio has the most sophisticated AVD scaling tool in the market. We can help you save on disk costs, optimize your storage and your profiles. We have multi-schedule and multi-trigger scaling capabilities, so you can scale based on consumption of the resource or based on a scheduling or both. We also have scale history, where you can see exactly when those machines turned on and off and why they turned on and off. We have reserved instance calculator, which will tell you if it's cheaper to actually go and reserve compute from Microsoft because your machines are on for so long. We have an end user self-service portal, which is really popular. It's a single session machine, for those use cases of those power users, IT users, and maybe your kind of executive and partner level users, where it allows them to do things like give themselves more compute if they need to, install their own applications that are curated by the admin team, even run their own PowerShell scripts as well. And then we have the Nerdio Advisor. Think of the Nerdio Advisor as the right sizing tool within the environment. It's going to look at the consumption over a period of time of your machines, and it's going to feed back to the admin team if you can if you need to scale up to give a better user experience, or if you can scale down and save costs. The Nerdio Advisor tool saved one customer over $80,000 per month. Really impressive stuff, obviously a large customer. So we have really granular tools to help you really operationalize and manage that cost of Azure AVD. And if we go next, please, Leon. So we do have that per user cost attribution reporting, where you can break down on a per user basis and a per host pool basis the cost of different components within Azure. This is key for organizations to really keep a track on their spend. Really important for law firms. The other thing is that you can push this detail out to Power BI, which is really popular as well. Power BI, you can do things like break things down for things like chargeback and do it by department. And if we can go next early on, another important one is, just breaking this down in terms of the types of cost savings. So on the left-hand side, if we look, we can auto scale and power manage the machines and save about 35%. We have burst capacity and just-in-time provisioning, which will save us about 5%. We have reserved instances and right sizing. That's another 5%. We have OS disk swap and shrink. That's 10%. And then we have auto scale and storage and profile shrink about 5%. That's about 60% plus or minus, but really it's going to depend on your solution, your workloads and so on. So that's why I've brought some real examples on the right hand side. So we have a global insurance agency saving over $110,000 per month. That's a 26% reduction for 13,000 plus users. The first thing to call out on that one is this solution now has been used by large organizations with 10,000, 20,000, even 50,000 users. But that's just one example. Next one, if we look at UK government department saving over $200,000 a month, that's a 67% reduction. That's for 9,000 plus users. So they're doing massive savings, 67%. That's an outlier, right? Most customers we see 40 to 60%. We have a global consultancy service who also kind of have legal offerings, saving over 197k a month. That's a 36% reduction for them. That's for 6.8 thousand users, and that goes all the way down to 470 users, 48% savings, 4.5k a month. Wealth management organization saving 15k a month, 46% reduction for 170 users. We're seeing our biggest kind of uptake and vertical at the moment that we're seeing in the UK and Ireland is in the legal sector. We are having lots of legal organizations now on this journey. Some are saving up to 57% of their costs in Azure Virtual Desktop. So Nerdio is the tool to help you operationalize AVD and the other Microsoft kind of technology stack in this space and help you manage and optimize the cost to do that. Next slide, please, Leo. And then finally, the third bucket that we like to talk about is the resiliency and risk mitigation. When we can automate those OS updates on Patch Tuesday, when we can automate the install of the latest version of applications and kind of automate all of that, that is less risky than having to have your admin teams manually do that and kind of have the time and capacity to do that on a monthly basis. You can automate that. It's much more secure and better for your organization. And AVD with Nerdio as well, in general, it is that kind of evergreen solution where you can kind of keep that up to date. You don't have to worry about kind of old infrastructure that's going outdated and becoming kind of legacy technical debt. Next up is Azure Scale Capacity and overcoming capacity limitation, as well as adding disaster recovery. We had a customer last Monday, they're based in the Netherlands. They had a D-series machine inside of Azure for their Azure Virtual Desktops. Their users tried to log in on Monday morning and that particular machine was unavailable in that data center. The IT team spent the whole morning switching the machines over to a different series of VMs. Their users weren't able to use it. It cost their business. Then in the evening, they spent another 4 hours, the IT team, switching them all back to the original size that they normally use. In Nerdio, that's 3 clicks. to completely mitigate that and automate that so that the users never see that impact. It automatically flips to a different VM and flips back when the old VM is available again. That customer is purely sold on Nerdio alone on that one feature. Again, it's thinking about that risk mitigation for your organization. Nerdio now also supports trusted launch and confidential computing. We also help to simply apply RDP policies such as watermarking and blocking screen capture. We have full built-in and custom RBAC roles as well, and we can harden the deployment of Nerdio inside of your Azure portal. Nerdio is a platform as a service solution that's deployed inside your tenant and subscription. That's very important. So you decide where it's deployed and you can lock that down. If we go to the next slide. We do have an AVD modeler, and look, we're just skimming the surface today of what Nerdio can help you achieve as an organization if you're on this journey to AVD, Windows 365 and Intune. We do have an AVD modeler tool. I have included the QR code. We have a light version on our website. The full version is in the tool itself. If you want to scan that QR code, you can punch in your details and see the type of savings and optimizations that Nerdio can make for your use cases. If you need any assistance with that, I'm sure Cloud Direct, but definitely ourselves here at Nerdio are more than happy to help you and take you through that modeler to model out your use cases. And then if we go to the next slide. Yeah, I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Cloud Direct for having me. I hope that was useful in terms of how Nerdio kind of operationalizes AVD, can build out and broaden out the capabilities, help you to optimize costs, help you to automate the entire environment and the life cycle of images, and help you ultimately to mitigate from risk. And like I said, some of the benefits there on the screen, if you're doing AVD, it's worth coming to talk to Cloud Direct and talking to Nerdio about how we can help you accelerate that, make it smooth, make sure that it's operational. So with that, I'll hand back to the Cloud Direct team. Thanks so much.
Okay, so next we're going to look at what next steps, and Dan's going to talk you through that. So Dan, back over to you.
Thanks, Leon. So of course, all important next steps. I suppose just a bit of context. I mean, Cloud Direct are an Azure expert MSP, which immediately puts us in the 0.1% of partners globally, as there are only ever 100 expert MSPs in the world. But we're also the Microsoft Partner of the Year for assessments as well, which is really important because obviously this is that first step, and it's how the delivery of the assessment goes is really going to define how the rest of the project is delivered and the success of that. But obviously what this means is that everything that we do aligns to best practice, which you can see here as the across all of the different kind of work streams that we have is delivered as the Cloud Adoption Framework, or CAF as it's known. Everything that we do follows these steps, and what's more is that we can get access, as you can see at the top there, access to a ton of funding pots, both from Microsoft and investment from Cloud Direct ourselves to help deliver on these steps. So one thing to note here is actually, much like Ashurst and Flaggate and the other firms that we've worked with, we were able to take you from that initial inception, which is the initial workshops you can see on the left, right the way through to the POC and pilot stages, completely funded, and then there are further funding pots to actually get you into that. The design, migrate, and then to complete the project, which means that it's a real no-brainer, I feel, to actually, if you have the right use case and you have a kind of a burning platform that you need to get away, let's start having those conversations, because as I said, we can take you right the way through to proving that it actually works, fully funded by Microsoft. So what we're going to briefly run you through are the first 3 stages, which are boxed in red, just to kind of show you kind of what the next steps will be. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So the initial discovery workshops. This allows us to dig into the reasons for the project itself. Understand the business requirements, your processes, and everything else that we need to capture. And this is delivered from our engineers sitting with your team. And this will allow you to understand. This will allow us, to understand how you want us to be able to be working with you on the projects as well. So we have we are flexible as an organisation to be able to work in the right ways that suit yourself. A lot of the firms that we work with have invested and have fantastic teams who really do understand the cloud programs and approaches and how to kind of deliver things properly, but for a certain reason they're either unable to have the capacity to be able to deliver the project in the timeframes, or they just lack a certain skill at a particular area. So we can work out whether you want us to be delivering this in its full entirety, or working, as we call it, as an adopt approach, to then inject resource where you need it, as well as to understand how we can drive the all-important knowledge transfer back into the team. I think our teach don't sell approach is well known within the industry and the wider within the UK and Microsoft as well, because of the level of effort that we actually put into kind of making sure that we understand your gaps and make sure that we can drive that knowledge transfer back into the team to understand, or be able to take it on themselves ultimately, but make sure that it's not just the technologies that are taken further, but it's actually you and your team as well. We then move on to the technical evaluation. So this is where we can utilize tools that are where appropriate from Microsoft. And this essentially captures your estate in its entirety to build out the all-important costings. So this is both for consumption and pro services, but also looking at those kind of migration paths, high-level designs, and to make sure that the next steps, and as I said earlier, the all-important kind of migration and production side of things are successful. And that's one of the reasons why we've got that the Microsoft Assessment Partner of the Year award, is because of the level of detail and effort that we put into these stages to make sure that you have all the information you're going to move forward. And of course, the next step after that is going to be the POC. So this is where we can actually prove the solution works, make sure that we've made any tweaks where appropriate to ensure it ticks all of your boxes. And at that point, we can then hand it back to you, so to speak, to then take it further within internally with your board to say, look, we've gone through this, we've managed to get a fully funded approach, understanding, digging into what we're actually trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and proving that it works before you even need to go to the board and finance teams to ask for budget for this next stage. And yeah, next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So as you can see, I mean, we've got a real strong focus within the legal sector, and we've worked with a number of great law firms where we've delivered full 360 Microsoft Cloud projects, and a few of these are actually joining us on the call today. So thank you for joining us. We have a solid focus in the legal sector. We have a team that's worked within this for a number of years. We get it. We understand the problems and the issues that you're facing. And look, really keen to kind of chat on any of the work that we've done in the past, and just to understand a little bit more about yourselves, just to see where if there are ways that we can work with each other and kind of overcome some of the challenges you might be facing. Thanks, Leon.
Okay, so now we'll just see if there's we're going to a Q&A section, but I want to thank both Dan and Gavin for their contributions. And if I just sort of summarise, you've got AVD, which is we've seen as a market leading product. With Cloud Direct, we can mitigate the cost of change for that adoption of AVD. And with Nerdio, we can mitigate the ongoing costs of managing that AVD. For me, adopting AVD versus anything else is a bit of a no-brainer. So, can I ask Kim, usually not, but are there any questions that have come through?
Yes, we have two.
Okay.
So the first question is, how soon do we need to engage before renewal dates to ensure that we have enough move-in time?
Okay.
I can jump into this one actually. I mean, it's of course it's one of those things that the more time the better, right? The more time that we have, the more time that we've actually got to explore it and build everything out to make sure it kind of works for you and deliver the POC. However, we can move as quickly as you can, realistically. There have been some times where we've had some engagements where we needed to get moving as quickly as possible because of a very short kind of burning platform and end date to the contract. What we typically say is with the kind of the approach that we take, we can kick off a workshop quite quickly because it's typically only around a 2 or 3 hour workshop. From there, we can then take the information away and then start building out kind of that initial view in terms of, as I said, the kind of the approach, the planning, the high level designs. Where there's tooling that's needed, that's typically kind of the lengthiest period of time. If we're looking at kind of an Azure migration fully, we'd say that we would utilize tooling and run that on the system for about 4 weeks to be able to capture that to capture the full estate, which can be started at the same time as the workshop, and then it would be and then it would probably be about two weeks for us to kind of pull all the information together to play that back to you, and then from there we can then move forward with actually start building out the POC environment and getting things moving as quickly as possible. Typically, the drawback that we get is just making sure that we align to kind of the firm's timescales. There's generally a lot of other projects that are ongoing, and that's generally the bits that's kind of held us back. But what I would say is that we've worked with some customers at the moment where they thought wrongly that their renewal for VMware actually was later in was early next year. Actually, turns out it's going to be October this year. They've gone and got a renewal from VMware where they were paying, I think it was something, they only had a small environment, it was around 10k per month. They're now paying 10k for the year, sorry. They're now paying 10k per month because of the kind of the extension. So it's gone up 10 times what they thought they were going to be, which has of course not gone down well within the firm itself. But we're trying to obviously mitigate that as much as possible by kind of working with them. Unfortunately, there's another couple of projects that meant that they've had to extend. But if they were able to actually have that time open, then we would have been able to deliver the project in that time and actually move them away and save them that money.
Yeah, and just to add to that, at Nerdio, we're all about accelerating that deployment, making that, all about speed. We've done that for customers in kind of 2 weeks. On average, we see it about 6 weeks for kind of smaller 200, 300 deployments. We done one in 8 days, but we don't recommend that. As you said, Dan, it's the longer the better. Yeah, right. 3 months, 6 months, that's the sweet spot. But we can, of course, do it especially with the help of strong partners like Cloud Direct. We can do it in a quicker time scale.
Right. Hopefully that answers their question.
And excuse me, I had a drink over the wrong way. And Kim, you said there was a second question.
Yes, there is a second question. Someone asked, what do I need to do to kickstart engagement with Cloud Direct to utilize the funding?
Brilliant. So yeah, again, I can
see over you, Dan.
yeah. So I mean, look, I think there's a slide coming next, which has kind of got all my details on. Oh, brilliant, here we are. Yeah, that was well timed. But there's, feel free to kind of reach out to me, or we've got our guys and everyone that's kind of joining the webinar today. Please do expect a phone call because they will be calling through, just to make sure you kind of got the most out of the session. But it's all down to us. I mean, there's the way that as soon as we engage, I'd say we can jump on a quick call, just dig into things a little bit more. I can bring on one of our technical experts who work alongside me within the legal sector, just to delve into it. And then it's over to us. There's very little that you need to be getting, little that you need to do to kind of worry about the funding. It's all partner led. We are the #1 AM partner, as it's called, the AM funding within Microsoft, within the UK, which means we get more funding than anyone else. So we've got a tried and tested approach to this. We can kind of log everything, request the funding amounts, and then all you need to do is essentially click on a button on an email to accept, and then it's over to us to make sure that it's all delivered. So it's really nice and simple. But I would say, with everything that's happening with VMware at the moment, we are getting busy. So please just drop me a message today, either give me a call or email or LinkedIn, whatever's the easiest for you, and then we can kind of get an initial call kicked off as soon as possible.
Wonderful. Okay, and if there are no more questions, Kim, then I will wrap up this call. I want to thank Dan and Gavin very much for your insights. This has been very informative. If there's any information you'd like to follow up from today's session, please feel free. We're more than happy to share these slides with you if required. Okay, thanks very much for your time, everyone. Oh,
thank you.
So sorry, there's another question that's just come in.
That is Colombo. Okay, what do we have?
It's quite a lengthy one. For legacy applications that are on-prem, do you have to have direct connections into Azure to make sure they perform okay? One of the only reasons we have VDI is because a legacy application that needs LAN speed, not WAN speed. So VDI allows us to have all desktops in the same data centers as the on-prem legacy application server.
So that's a really good question. Obviously, it depends on the nature of the application, but you can deliver SD-WAN links, express routes, which will operate at the same speed as your LAN. So effectively, your connectivity to Azure would be the same speed as your LAN. So that would be eminently solvable. There may be other ways to solve that. So for example, why is that legacy application physically there? I'd need to know a little bit more about the architecture of the application. Are you referring to a client application that speaks to a database? If so, could the database move, unless you're talking about some kind of AS400 mainframe, but maybe that database could then move to the cloud. That wouldn't be, if it's a single application, wouldn't necessarily be prohibitively expensive, and then you could get the full benefits. If not, you could put a WAN infrastructure in between to go and solve for that. If you have high-speed internet and you were doing this over an internet-facing connection rather than a WAN-side connection, again, if you've got those high speeds, then it would be doable. The key thing is what you're describing is a concept that would need to be proved. So Daniel can take you through a proof of concept to say, I want to go and evaluate how my application will work in Azure using this approach. These are, this is my my quality criteria that I need to hit. It needs to be, responsive in X number of ways, and then you run that proof of concept and you evaluate it against your success criteria, and the concept will either be proved or it's not. And obviously you would have multiple pathways. Which network connectivity route would you use? Are you going to look to move your data to Azure? So there's many ways that we can solve for that, and again, obviously with funding mitigating that cost of change, maybe this is an opportunity that you should explore in a bit more detail with one of my technical colleagues.
Yeah, and just to add to that, sorry, yeah, I'll jump in. Just add to that, there is kind of tools out there as well. There's app conversion tools out there that could possibly be relevant depending on the type of app. You also now have AVD support for Azure Stack HCI as well. That just went generally available in February. So as Leon said, lots of different options to kind of answer that. But Dan, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, no, just echoing Leon really. I mean, it sounds like we've probably got your, I'm not sure if we have, but we've probably got your name who kind of asked the question. I'll get one of the guys to kind of reach out with you, because we can quite easily book in a 15-20 minute chat with one of our pre-sales engineers just to bounce some things off. I'm sure there's probably going to be some further questions from that anyway. So yeah, happy to help where we can.
Okay, and a really good question, which leads me to my last thank you, which is to you, the audience. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you on the next webinar. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Will.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.